Hey everyone, it's Jay Young with King Operating, and I really do appreciate you being here today. We're starting back the Jay Young Show. I know it's been a while. I've had a lot of phone calls, a lot of people. When are we getting back to this? And we are back now. We're going to give you several episodes a month. It's going to be exciting. I'm looking forward to this one, particularly today, because we're going to start off with David Blackmon, because David is he's an author, podcaster, public policy expert. And that's something I'm not. I tell you what, that's a lot of reading and a lot of fine lines and little words that go into that. But David, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. That's why my glasses are so thick, Jay. I spend all my time reading.
Hey man, I'd get headaches. But anyway, so tell us a little bit about your background before we get started on some great topics in oil and gas.
Yeah, I've been in and around the oil and gas business now for 44 years, going all the way back to when I got out of college in 1979. Spent about 40 of those years in the industry itself, working mainly in the upstream sector for several independent producers, and then in between a year at Shell, which didn't last very long, but we parted amicably. And after that, I kind of semi-retired in 2016 and started doing some consulting, and have for a time been a contributor at Forbes.com on energy-related topics. I'm also a contributor at the Daily Caller, World Oil Magazine, and the Petroleum Economist now. So I do a lot of writing, have a couple of podcasts that I do, and just like you, and just love writing and talking about energy. It's a very diverse and complicated topic these days.
Yeah, and there's a lot that could change in a really, really short time. Yeah. With policies or the price. I mean, the price of oil and gas is obviously very cyclical and finding out. So were you an engineer, a geologist, or what?
Well, no, I started out as an accountant.
Okay.
And migrated initially into regulatory affairs in the early 90s, and then a few years after that into government affairs, and spent the last 25 years in public policy arena.
Wow.
Related to oil and gas and other energy topics at the federal and state, and even occasionally at the local level. So I
gotcha.
Had a lot of exposure to a lot of different regulations and laws.
Okay, that's awesome. Good for you. Hey, but what's the biggest field that you were ever a part of that went from zero or a few producers to what's the big one that you sit around and talk to your buddies about? Cigars and beer. What is that? What's that big one? What's the big one?
Yeah. Well, there were several over the years. I was at Burlington Resources, which is now a part of ConocoPhillips. We were the big producer out in Northwest New Mexico in the 80s and 90s, where we were developing the Fruitland Coal, which was an early unconventional play, drilling vertical wells with hydraulic frac jobs into this coal seam and producing the gas out of it. Later, I was with El Paso Corporation, the E&P company at El Paso Corporation, at the advent of the Eagle Ford Shale in 2009. Early 2009, we drilled our first well successfully in the Eagle Ford. And then a couple of years later, drilled successful wells, a series of really excellent wells out in the Permian Basin into the Wolfcamp Formation. And so I kind of, had an exposure to all the big natural gas and then oil plays later, as they came up. Burlington was also a very early big player in the Barnett Shale as well, around 1999, 2002 timeframe.
Wow. Okay. All right. That's good. So in the Permian Basin, the Wolfcamp, that was a vertical play when you were back then, right?
Yes, in El Paso had been drilling wells out there, vertical wells into conventional formations. But in 2010 started, the initial program. Had a lot of legacy leasehold down around Webb County and in the very rich, oily part of the play, and drilled a lot of successful oil wells there. And from 2010 until the company was sold in 2012.
Yeah, yeah. That's just for some of the people there that you drill vertical wells, you're only producing from one horizon, if you will. But if you take it horizontally, you can go out horizontally and frack every 150 feet. So it's unconventional, wolf camp. I mean, it's taking the Permian Basin from 1 million barrels a day 10 years ago, or 11, 12, 1 million barrels a day to 5.5, almost 6 million barrels a day. Every day, 5 million more barrels of oil are being produced because they went horizontal. And it is, I mean, I remember going out there, my great-grandfather was from there, but I remember going out there and drilling, getting a lease. We had several leases from several big ranches and just drilling wells, and they'd come in at 100 barrels a day, and they'd be at 8 or 9, and
those were great wells. They didn't cost a lot to drill, and they high porosity and permeability formation.
Yeah,
get a lot of production. Those were great wells during those.
Right. But then to think that they're going to go horizontal and come in at 1,000 barrels a day, I mean, you need a lot more capital to drill, but the reward was just so greater. And when you have $50, $60, $70 oil, it just makes it.
Yeah, it makes a big difference. And of course, when we started drilling out in the Permian and Eagle Ford too, the horizontal lateral part of the well would be, quarter to half mile. And now they're drilling 2, 3, 4 mile laterals now. And really enhancing the amount of recoveries you get out of each well these days. So the technology improves, constantly, as you well know.
Yeah, that is so true. And to go down 2 miles vertically underneath the earth, and then go 3 to 4 miles horizontal, I mean, that's 5, 6, 7 miles. But today's technology, you can hit literally a window 10 miles away. I mean, if you look out your window 7, 8, 10 miles away, that's what you can do today underneath the ground. I mean, it's pretty amazing.
Oh, it's amazing. It's phenomenal. My uncle was a drilling superintendent at EOG and Devon Energy during the early days of the Eagle Ford. He retired, in like 2011, but he told me one time, they can drill those wells with a mile-long lateral and target an area the size of a dime and hit it. I mean, the science is that precise.
Underneath the ground.
Yeah.
I mean, back in the day, when the late 80s and early 90s, when you were drilling Austin Chalk wells, you went down with your bit and you'd go horizontally to go into the vertical fractures. And,
right.
But you didn't know where that drill bit was if it was going to come out of the ground, or you didn't know where that bit was going because you couldn't drive it. But today, just very, very different. But
isn't that an amazing formation, the Austin Chalk?
It really is.
So I started in the industry in '79, and the first company I worked for, one of the early companies I worked for, was a significant early producer in the Austin Chalk. And here we are 44 years later, and the Austin Chalk just keeps going through these periodic revivals.
Right.
Now people, again, are drilling just tremendous horizontal wells in the Chalk.
Well, I'll tell you this, and you probably you may know this. You're smarter than me about all this stuff. But I was talking to a guy, one of our new engineers, has just drilled a lot of wells for Geo Southern, UPRC, all that. But he said in today's world, you can't tell whether or not a well is being drilled and fracked in the Eagle Ford formation or the Austin Chalk. They are fracked identical. You see the depth because one's above the other one. But I always wondered about that. I wondered because Austin Chalk came in at 1,000 barrels a day, and they'd go down to 100 barrels a day or 50 barrels a day within 2 months. That's just how the Austin Chalk was. So I thought if you went horizontally, normally you have a bed, we'll say COVID methane with the New Mexico stuff. But if you have the Permian Basin, it's an unconventional. It's 300 feet thick, 2 miles lateral. But that whole entire formation produces in the Permian, where in the Austin Chalk, there's all these vertical fractures, and if you go down, you punch into 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 of them or something, you're doing really well. But the completion side, so let's kind of get. I know, David. We could talk forever.
We could talk about anything.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. But I think people want to know about your thoughts and your ideas about Biden. We've been here a couple of years. We've kind of, what are your thoughts now on how's he going to go into the next election? It looks like it's going to be a tight one, but we won't go there. But that's another 3 hours. But what is your thoughts on policies and going into the elections for our next election?
Yeah, well, everyone in the industry should just be prepared to become the boogeyman for the Biden campaign. I think he'll continue to double down on more and more extreme kinds of measures that they hope will impede your ability to do your business. They've tried a lot of things in this first term and still have a lot more that are coming here over the next year and a half. They haven't, they've been able to slow things down significantly where federal lands are concerned, right? Because they control the leasing process and permitting on federal lands. And so we've seen a slowdown in the Rocky Mountain states where several, pretty prolific areas up there have really slowed down. The offshore in the Gulf of Mexico anyway has actually, come back a little bit over the last year despite everything. But they refuse to have lease sales as required under the law. And so eventually that's going to really have a very significant impact on federal lands. In places like Texas and Oklahoma, Louisiana, where you don't have a lot of federal lands involved, it's much more difficult for the federal government to impede the oil and gas business. And that's why one of the main reasons why we're seeing, for example, a real expansion of liquefied natural gas export capacity. We've seen a lot of pipeline build out in this part of the country where we live, and but where interstate pipelines are concerned, has been an area they've been able to slow things down, where it's not on federal lands, because anytime you have any project that goes across state lines, you have to get a permit from the FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and they've been able to hold up several big projects there. Although the Trans Mountain project, finally did get its final permits in place over there on the East Coast, coming out of the Marcellus Shale. But otherwise, they try to, of course, they're implementing a new methane regulation, methane emissions, but the industry's done such a great job of proactively curbing those emissions and inventorying things in advance that one's not even going to have as big an impact as it might have had otherwise. And I think the industry doesn't get enough credit for that, for acting proactively to cut those methane emissions, to reduce flaring voluntarily without being forced to do it by new regulations.
Right.
I mean, ExxonMobil basically has, and several other companies have eliminated incidental flaring in the Permian Basin entirely, although they do still have some flaring by permit that goes on. And so, something that was a huge problem 2-3 years ago and making a lot of news, you never see a news report anymore about flaring in the Permian Basin because it's been dealt with very effectively. Bakken Shale, same thing. Mm-hmm. And so it's, but in the campaign, as we've seen since Jimmy Carter in the 1970s, the oil and gas industry is going to become a whipping boy for the Democratic candidate. That happens in every presidential election, and this one will be no exception. And I suspect, given Biden's tendencies here that seem to become, a little wilder with every passing month, I think we're going to see some pretty extreme language out of him in his campaign demonizing the oil and gas business. So hopefully the industry will do some things to counteract that in terms of telling its own story more effectively. That's always a hard thing to do to try to, get through the media noise to really educate the public about what is really happening out there. So I just think that next year's campaign is going to be very tough. There's going to be a lot of talk about energy due to the focus of the administration on this whole energy transition thing. And so, everyone just needs to be ready that you're going to become the bad guys in the media again.
Right. Well, that's politics, right? And that's,
Yep.
I mean, I don't know how much of that helped him get elected.
I don't know either. And no one really measured it, I don't think, accurately or competently. He did, say a lot of negative things about the industry in that first campaign and promised, for example, to outlaw fracking in the U.S. And he hasn't done that. He hasn't been able to do that. He really doesn't have any authority to do that.
Right.
But promises like that will be made, and we'll just have to deal with it like the industry always does.
Yeah. He did shut off a lot of pipelines. Anything that was on the table, man, he was no. It's that's politics.
Yeah, the Keystone XL.
Oh yeah.
One,
Yeah.
And that, I want to just let me say one thing about that.
Mm-hmm.
That decision was such an outrageous decision that it did get a lot of attention that it should have gotten, because he canceled that project that was not in violation of a single federal regulation or law. He canceled that project, an $8 billion project
Mm-hmm.
that was going to create 100,000 jobs
Right.
at one point or another.
Right.
And even though the company that was the operator, TransCanada, which is now TC Energy, had already spent $4 billion of that planned $8 billion investment.
Mm.
And he did it with a stroke of the pen,
Yeah.
with no other legal authority. That is one of the most extraordinary presidential decisions in American history. And we should recognize it for what it is.
Yeah. Well, that was going to help us get that oil out of Canada that we since had to buy from Russia, and then
Right.
And
now we have to bring the oil from Canada down on trains and trucks.
Exactly. Yes. Costs a lot more money for the consumer, and it's always so much cheaper and more efficient to run it by pipelines, which
And safer.
and safer. Yeah, that's true. Very true. Getting all those big trucks off the roads, definitely. Well, let's talk about. I got 2 or 3 more questions. I don't want to run out of time, but I got one about the liquefied natural gas. You're saying that we produce a lot of natural gas in Texas and Louisiana, and then because of interstate pipelines, because of us not being able to transport it, and now things are seem to open up. What is your thought about the demand of natural gas? We went from, and our investors out there, they know it, because we were getting $9 for MCF a year ago, and it's $2. It's just come up a little bit here lately, but it's what's going to happen there, and what do you think about the price going into the end of the year, maybe next year on natural gas?
Yeah, I'm kind of a permanent pessimist on natural gas prices because we just have so much of it. The abundance of the resource in the United States for natural gas, just in Texas alone,
Mm-hmm.
is hundreds and hundreds of years of national supply here in the U.S. And so to the extent you can open these international markets with LNG exports, that's a positive for the industry. But, we only have like 105 rigs drilling for natural gas today. And a lot of that's because there's so much associated gas with all those oil wells in the Permian. But a lot of it's just because there's just so much gas. And so even as you open up these additional markets overseas, and there is high demand for natural gas in Europe and Asia and in Africa and in developing nations all over the world, and that's going to continue to grow. But the magnitude of the supply is just so enormous here in the United States. It's hard to see we did have those high gas prices for the better part of a year there.
Mm-hmm.
But that was largely a response to the war in Ukraine and the interruption of Russia's supplies, and now Russia's, got a lot of their supplies going again.
Right.
And so the market continues to be oversupplied. But we are, right now expanding LNG export capacity. Just had a big permit issued for a big project down there outside of Brownsville. And ExxonMobil's doing a big expansion of their Corpus Christi operations. And, it's a big deal. It's going to be a growing business for a long time. And the Biden administration, because of the geopolitical strategic value of LNG and its potential to support the war that in Ukraine, the Ukrainian people in that war, the Biden administration's been pretty okay about issuing permits for new export facilities for LNG.
Mm-hmm.
So that piece of things is moving forward pretty efficiently, and we're going to have a lot more export capacity by the year 2027. It takes several years, of course, to get these things done.
Right.
So that's a real growth area for the industry in the United States, and will be for a long time.
Yeah, but that's a good thing. I mean, most countries, I don't know if everybody realizes this or not, but most countries are producing so much more oil than they consume. I mean, their supply is way up there. It's like, I forget, was it Russia produces 6-7 million barrels a day. They're only using 3.
Right.
So they have 3 to 4, whatever the numbers are. My numbers are wrong. Please don't write in. Subscribe below. Don't unsubscribe because I don't know the numbers. But there's something about but anyway, long story short, they got 4 or 5 million barrels a day that they can sell other countries. And that's what we need because we're not producing 100% on the oil side that we need, but we are producing more on the gas side than we need. So therefore, we've got to find a market for that natural gas, which I think I read Russia, cut off a lot of gas because of, and I mean, China, India are paying $4 or $5 per MCF, and we'd be glad to sell it for 3, 3.5. I mean, but I know it takes time to get over there, and it takes and that. But anyway, all right, it's good. What are your thoughts about oil here going in the next couple of years? There's your thought on gas. What do you think about oil?
Well, some people I really respect expect the market to become undersupplied at the second half of the year, and that should mean firming up of oil prices sometime in the second half of the year. I think the anticipation is around September, October. You could see oil climbing back up. The WTI price, which is sitting around 70 today, could climb back up in the 85, 90 range by the end of the year.
Yeah.
And that, of course, would be a much healthier situation for, increasing the level of drilling. We've had the rig count, has fallen now 20% during the course of the first half of 2023. The Enverus daily rig count sitting at 723 today. It was at 860 something at the first of the year. And frankly, I expect that decline to continue in the second half because what happens, Jay, is these corporate producers put their second half budgets in place. They start the year with a first of the year budget for drilling. And then along about April, early May, they revise the budgets for the second half.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when those revisions were going on by the corporate producers, crude prices were pretty low compared to the last couple of years. And that tells me that the corporate producers in the shale space are probably going to drop some more rigs in the second half. And the private producers, if the price does go up, can be a lot more nimble in terms of, activating more rigs and drilling more wells.
Mm-hmm.
But with a corporate producer, you set your budget in place to kick in on July 1 for the second half of the year. And if the price jumps up $20 a barrel 2 months later. Trying to do a major revision to that second half budget can often require approval by the board of directors, depending on how much more you want to spend. And that's a complicated, difficult process within these corporations that kind of mitigates against corporate producers, having a big dramatic increase in drilling should the price rise again. So I just think as we sit here today, the rig count, according to Enverus, is 723. If we have that same level of active drilling rigs at the end of the year, then that's probably going to mean that the prices increase pretty substantially. And some of the corporate producers decided at least not to drop rigs off. And so I just think it's going to be a pretty static second half, and the price will be higher at the end of the year than it is now.
Right.
If I had to guess, I'd guess, Brent at 90 and WTI around 83, 84, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. I mean, I'm in the oil business for a long time. And I mean, I think it's just I think to say the bottom is we've hit the bottom, 65. To be a good bottom, everything else from here, because, we can get some wells drilled at $65 a barrel and they'll pay for themselves. Now at 80, 100, 120, a lot more, you can dust off a lot more prospects out of the drawer and bring them up and drill those, and those are more economic at higher prices if you don't spend too much drilling them. But I think you're right, and I like that. I really do like the idea of $80 and going into the winter, and then the summertime next year. I can't see the overall demand just going down as fast as Biden wants it to. Can you say it like that?
Not going to. Yeah, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
These timetables this administration's putting in place are so ridiculous, and they're just based in fantasies that aren't going to happen.
Yeah.
And there's 1,000 reasons why they're not going to happen. That I guess these social planners at the federal level, they're incapable of thinking these things through to their logical conclusions, and that's going to be a real problem for us down the road as consumers, because what it means is we're going to end up with an energy crisis sometime in the next 2 or 3 years, and that's going to pretty dramatically increase our costs for energy as consumers, and that's going to be a bad thing for the economy when it happens. And this bunch in Washington right now is so clueless where energy is concerned. It's really very disconcerting to me.
Wow. Okay. All right. Well, let me ask you this. I need to finish up, conclude with this question. I think this is a good one because, Dallas Morning News today. Well, no, I'm sorry, a couple of days ago. I don't know if it was in the Wall Street Journal or not, but I did see in the Dallas Morning News, front page of the business section is the top 4 U.S. producers. Let me make sure I get this right. The top 4 car manufacturers in the United States. Top 4. Make sure I'm not messing that up. But the top 4 manufacturers of cars this year. Guess who they were? Guess who they were?
Well, in the United States, I would guess they're probably Toyota, Tesla, maybe General Motors, and
well, you can go by model.
Honda, maybe.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I should have said top model car, like the F-250 or the F-150, all that stuff.
Most that are sold?
No, manufactured in the United States. Anyway, it's the Tesla 1, 2, 3, and 4. I mean, Dallas Morning News a couple of days ago. Today is whatever the date is today.
Today's the 29th.
29th. So look at the Dallas Morning News 27th, and that's a 27th or 28th. But anyway, so let me ask you, even if that is true, which hey, not everything you read in the paper is true, but 99% of it is. But let's just say it is true. What are your thoughts about that? Is this Elon Musk guy going to run over us and we're going to use batteries for the rest of our lives, and we don't need gasoline next at their rate. I mean, next year, right? Is that what are your thoughts, or how do you answer people when you meet people and they say,
well, yeah. So the first thing to understand about what Tesla's doing in the United States is they're not selling all those cars in the United States. They're exporting a lot of them overseas, first of all, from their U.S. factories. But a lot of them are being sold, and the infrastructure for electric vehicles is being built out. I mean, I was at a Buc-ee's the other day, and they had 10 Tesla superchargers sitting out there, adjacent to the 100 gas pumps that they had at the Buc-ee store. And one of those Tesla superchargers was occupied while every pump, I couldn't find a gas pump in the daggum parking lot. I had to sit and wait.
"Oh my God, wow!"
So, it's happening. They're expanding the EV infrastructure, and that's going to happen because the subsidies are in place and the government is funding it. And what's going to happen though is that you're going to end up putting such a big load, first of all, on the electricity system. We've seen ERCOT already has a hard time mustering enough energy every day to keep the lights on with our current grid. And unless we can double the current grid in the next 6 or 7 years, which is a physical impossibility, then there's a real limit to how much the electric vehicle market can expand, because all those chargers are draining the grid, right? Unless there's a diesel generator sitting in the back of the store powering them, because that electricity doesn't just materialize out of thin air, despite what some people think. And so there's just so many limiting factors on how much that sector can grow. And yes, Tesla's doing well, but look at Ford Motor Company, which is losing $60,000 for every electric vehicle it sells in the United States.
Right.
How long are they going to be able to keep that up?
Right.
General Motors, same kind of thing. It may not be quite $60,000 for every car, but they're losing money on these cars, every one of them, and they're offsetting the losses with sales of their gasoline vehicles. Well, that's a rubric you can keep up for a few years, but it's not a long-term business model that's going to succeed. And so Tesla is really the only electric vehicle maker in the United States that is truly profitable, and profitable without the subsidies. And it took Tesla 14 years to get to that point. So this is the electric vehicle industry. As long as the government wants to continue printing money to prop it up, will continue to grow. But the next time you elect a president who isn't willing to bankrupt his grandchildren to subsidize electric vehicles, then that growth is going to have a hard time continuing, because it's not at the moment, at least, it's not a sound business model for anyone except Tesla.
Right. Okay. Good thought. That's a really good thought, because it kind of gets me back to the question of peak demand, and I've heard different ideas about because obviously oil and gas is all about supply and demand. The more supply you have on the market, the less demand, prices are going to go down. So the demand's crazy. It's kind of like a woman's purse or whatever, commodities. It's all about, if you have more of something, it's worth less than if you had less of it, and there's a big need out there. And we have an addiction, as George Bush said in the 2006 State of the Union address. He said, we have an addiction to oil, and that's so true. We can't live without it. We got to have it. So, and the demand continues to go up. And even they said this year that the demand for oil is going to go up 3 to 4% in the world. That's 100 million barrels a day in the world to 103, 104. So that's when do you think, I know I said a minute ago that this is your last question, but I do have one more.
Well, it's okay. I'm happy to go on. It's
called the Jay Young Show. But I'd love to have you on again real soon, because, man, we could talk forever. What is your thought about peak demand? Any idea? Have you ever run that out or thought this is
Well, I don't waste time with it because I'm 66 years old. I don't think I'll live to see the day.
But Pete,
And I
man,
expect to live another 20 years, you know.
yeah,
So I think, you know, what we're having right now, they call it an energy transition. But what we're really having is an energy expansion because our society, the demand is expanding, the economy is expanding, the population is expanding, the number of gadgets we use is expanding every day, and the number of products we make with petroleum, with petroleum expands every day. And the thought that we're going to somehow stop all that in the next 10 years is lunacy. It's just it's a Disney fantasy world that doesn't exist. And I suspect so we just saw the issuance of a new study this week that found that in 2022, petroleum and coal supplied 82% of primary energy globally, right? And so that's essentially the same percentage that the same study found 25 years ago. It hasn't changed. And that's despite trillions of dollars invested in subsidies for green energy and electric vehicles. Well, we're going to invest trillions more over the next 25 years.
Yeah.
So I suspect when that study is issued again in the year 2048, we'll still see petroleum and coal, fossil fuels supplying about 80% of primary energy across the face of the earth.
Right.
We're going to have a lot more electric vehicles on the road then, a lot of solar, a lot of wind, all these things. But at the end of the day, as you said, it's an addiction because petroleum and natural gas and fossil fuels have they have served as the foundation for modern society. And without them, you can't have modern society. And you can't continue to advance to an even more modern society without them.
Right.
And that's just the way it is. And so, I just don't expect to ever live to see peak demand will happen sometime in the future. I think I'll be long gone when it does.
Okay. All right, great. Well, very well said. And you heard it from the man himself, Mr. David Blackmon. David, I really appreciate you coming on today. I could talk to you, I know, for another several hours, as long as until I had to go home for dinner. My wife would be calling me to go home for dinner. So I know we could talk for a long time. I hope to catch up again real soon and have you back on the Jay Young Show. You've been great, and I got so many other questions that we didn't get to, but I don't want to carry it longer than we normally do, so I wanted to keep it down. But David, love to have you on back next, sometime soon. But thank you very much for your time this afternoon and being on the Jay Young Show. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad to see you're back.
Absolutely, I appreciate that. And everybody, the Jay Young Show. Let's do this again soon. Everybody, listen to David Blackmon. You can get a hold of him. David, where can we find you on the web besides just David Blackmon Oil and Gas or something? Or
to keep it very quick, you can find everything I do at my Substack, and the address is just my last name, Blackmon, BLACKMON.substack.com, and I'll link to everything I do from that platform.
Oh, great. That's a great way to do it. Maybe I need to do the Jay Young stuff the same way.
Here you go.
That's great. Thank you very much. All right, well, everybody, thank you for coming today and listening to the Jay Young Show. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. We have lots of great people coming on, but right now we appreciate you, David, for being here and look forward to having you on again soon.